Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Professor Michael Mainelli, Chairman of ZEN Group, and Michael is going to give us his views on some global perspectives. And remember, everyone, a couple of years ago, Michael was the Lord Mayor of the City of London, so he did an awful lot of travelling during that period, and he's done even more since. How are you?
Well, Tony, it's always great to be back and always great to connect with Alderney, which is, as you know, one of my favorite places, and not just for the puffins. Yeah. Yeah, we've been traveling a lot lately. As Lord Mayor, I did 101 days on business travel and a couple weeks of private outside of the UK. Last year, I did 117 days of business travel outside of the UK.
Wow.
And this year, up until the Gulf conflict, was on course to exceed that. So I'm probably one of those rare people who, somewhat Schadenfreude, kind of appreciated having to take a little bit less travel this year due to some of the conflicts out there. But still a lot of travel ahead. So off to Taiwan next month, off to Spain for a week, off to the Cayman Islands and the Americas. So still a lot of travel. And as ever, you learn something from it. I think it was Mark Twain. What did Mark Twain say? The world is a book. Those who do not travel read only one page. So I'm really pleased to be getting around. It's a different type of education
Yeah,
and possibly
absolutely. Yeah,
cheaper than
yeah.
speedboats, but not inexpensive.
Can we start on the global perspectives by taking a look at the economics of the various continents? And obviously, Europe is probably top of the list. It's incredible that the UK, with a growth rate of 0.01%, is leading the rest of Europe.
Well, as ever, and we founded Long Finance at Zen back in 2005 to try and take the long-term view. These sort of tit for tat type reconciliations don't really matter to me. Further, as we found over the years, increasingly the volatility of the retrofits, the corrections have increased.
Yeah.
So reacting to a 0.1% here or there. In truth, since Brexit, the UK has done slightly worse than the European average, about a percent. But 1% compounded leads you into some severe issues. The situation you're describing, though, isn't about the UK versus Europe. It's about Europe versus the world. And
Yeah, yeah.
we're all in the same boat and really not performing. And I think a lot of this is because the world has been fragmented. Everybody was kind of helping everybody else grow, much as people decry, and we'll probably come on to China and manufacturing and share of growth. Everybody was benefiting in the medium term and the short term from China. You were getting cheaper goods, you had more money to spend, your economy was growing. It was all good stuff at that time. What we're now seeing is this fragmentation, as it's called, or deglobalization. So it's kind of like we now have a set of regional weather systems, and they're all running at very different speeds. So, to me, Asia is, manufacturing has become the core to manufacturing with high savings. Europe, as we know, is regulated and energy constrained, and we can come on to that. America, the expectations are interesting, although it's intriguing if you poke at America. You find that there are huge areas of weakness. So there are a couple of spot industries growing very, very fast, and some others that aren't. And then, of course, those laggards, which always perplex economists: Africa, Latin America. What's going on there? Why can they never get going? And should you or shouldn't you treat Australia, as an economy, given the small size of the nation population-wise, or is it just sort of a global minerals warehouse?
And the enemy, Michael,
And the enemy.
from a cricketing perspective.
I see.
But
Well, actually, from a sailing perspective too.
okay, so we're agreed on that in two departments. Um, but coming back to Europe, I mean, the thought of Volkswagen shedding 100,000 members of staff,
Yeah.
the losses that Stellantis, who's what Fiat and a whole conglomeration, Peugeot, Citroen, etc., etc., making huge losses. Are we really ready to replace the internal combustion engine, given the fact that China's flooding the market with cheap electric vehicles?
Hmm. Well, Stellantis has lost, which is something like 25, $26 billion.
Yeah.
Uh, was driven by, as you say, all these write-downs as it wrote off its EV debt, or sorry, EV bet, and basically said not on. Um, I, how do I say this? I think part of the problem is not going all in. Um, I remember being over at a German plant based in Munich, the manufacturing cars, only 10 years ago, and they were
Starting with
taking
a B.
they were taking apart a Tesla at that time and
Yeah.
deriding it. Oh, the quality wasn't there, all this, and they had some very good points. Teslas are not manufactured to German standards, particularly in terms of things like treating the final interior works and the paint and the rusting and all that. But whilst they were in the details of disassembling this, they were missing the big picture, which is people were buying them
Mm.
in droves. Now, at that time, as you may well recall, other people were buying Teslas because they wanted to do virtue signaling and they wanted all that. But in truth, they turn out to be okay vehicles, and they turn out to have a decent lifetime cost. And that's before we get into the competition of the wider EV market. So a lot of these companies were saying, a bit like Augustine, I want to be virtuous, but not today. And so they were trying to run an internal combustion thing and also do an EV. And that kind of double bet meant that you were split. Your R&D departments were split. People had no idea where to go. I'm reminded of years ago, I was involved in the construction of the Channel Tunnel,
Yeah.
and I remember having a discussion in the late 80s with some British rail management at that time. And I said to them, would they please make up their mind that they were either behind the Channel Tunnel or not behind the Channel Tunnel? One way or the other, because meetings were starting with, well, if the Channel Tunnel's built, we'll need new ticketing systems, we'll need new freight arrangements from Blackpool, we'll need all that. And then somebody said, well, what if it's not built? Well, if it's not built, then we don't do this and that. And this just went on from the period I was involved with them, from 86 to about 92. And I think it was about 88. I said, would you please just make up your mind? Yeah, but what if we're wrong? I said, it doesn't matter. You can't split like this.
Yeah.
And what happened subsequently, Stratford wasn't really positive, for another 15 years, 20 years. They were dithering and dithering. And so we wound up with, that huge braking system that hits you as you come from France to Britain for ages, the problems with the Wi-Fi and the phone signal. So make a bet and do it. And in this case, all of the continental firms and the American firms decided that they weren't going to bet on EV. And EV is more expensive than just the R&D of your firm. It's about getting your government to support charging stations, upgrading the grid system, which is still not really built for it. So all these things had to be done.
Mm.
And the minute
Hmm.
you split the bet, well, you wound up achieving neither.
So we're really in a situation, even at this point, where indecision is costing us.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been that we want to have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
We want to have a nice, soft kind of civil service type structure. Everything's really, really sweet, where we get sort of mediocre infrastructure, but our tax rates go up. To be competitive, you have to compete,
Of
and
course you
it's
do.
not.
Yeah. 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 So, and we're also seeing it with HS2, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah,
The
well, yeah.
grandiose plan there is shrunk back to Birmingham to London sort of thing.
And look at where the money's been spent on it. You see, again, it's that indecision of, well, we'll have another study, we'll do this, we'll do that. I know that some of the construction, a lot of people consider wasted, the bat tunnel and things, but most of the money has been spent on, consultants, accountants, government management, ministers, studies, not actually doing anything.
No, no picks and shovels from that point of view.
Yeah,
Anyway,
well,
I think the salvation of the internal combustion engine is just around the corner because, as you're well aware, in Bonneville, JCB are hoping to break the world speed record with a hydrogen powered car. So there you are.
yeah.
That sorts
Well,
that one out.
hydrogen is a different story entirely, and one I'm really quite favorable for. But
Me
we have
too.
a long long debate on that.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but internal combustion is ultimately doomed. Is it doomed in 200 years? Is it doomed in 50? Is it doomed in five? But the dominance of EVs as I travel
Yeah,
outside of Europe and America is gargantuan.
yeah.
One story from 2 years ago was going back to Beijing. It had been my first trip to Beijing after the pandemic in 2024. And I rang my wife. I said, Elizabeth, do you know what's surprising here? She said, oh, Beijing. I remember when I was there with you, it was horrible. And I said, no, there are clean skies.
Wow.
There were blue skies. And actually, that particular week, the numbers aren't quite as good as that, but that particular week, actually, Beijing had cleaner air than London.
Yeah.
And I'm not particularly, I mean, I do think a number of good things have come from Sadiq's Khan Ulah's and other initiatives. We have a lot cleaner air in London in the last decade that we often don't get comments for. And again, that's another long-term thing where, what Sadiq Khan and others have done to reduce the pollution in London is saving thousands of lives every year, but it's kind of unnoticed.
Well,
It's
yeah, I guess so. I mean, let's go on to Asia and
mm,
look at China because that's become the workshop of the world because we've decided to export the work that needs used to be done here to China.
mm.
And most things that you buy from Amazon have got made in China on them. Was that a mistake?
From an economics point of view, it, the concept of trade with other nations, is absolutely crucial. I think it was Adam Smith said something along the lines of, no nation ever lost money by trading. Trading well. So
Mm,
we should be giving, in terms of comparative advantage and specialization, things to countries that are better done there, whether it's China or Vietnam or America or Brazil. It's irrelevant. There were a few problems in the way in which we did that. We frequently made mistakes, both ways, by the way, on, say, for example, environmental charges. Were the Chinese building factories where they could pollute, and we would take it. And there were definitely some problems in there. So I'm not trying to claim it's rosy, but these were industries that we were not competitive at. What we failed to do was to develop industries where we were competitive.
mm.
So, we actually had a jump on EV. Remember, again, the original EV firm was Tesla, and the original jump was Elon Musk. And I'm not a particular proponent or fan of the man, but he has shaken up a lot of industries for good, saying you can build an EV that works.
Yeah,
And he said no at the time. All the
yeah,
experts, Stellantis and BMW and Ford, and all said the man's a fool. Um, and it turns out he wasn't a fool. But China just said, okay, we're going to go into this. And I think it's difficult. People play the subsidy game, and there's an interesting study out by the Chinese, no less, claiming that we never subsidized. And that study protests too much. But the Chinese do compete. They've got something like, I forgot to remember, about 140 EV firms manufacturing automobiles and all that. And they compete a lot. What China is very good at doing is actually using the market. Deng Xiaoping was famous for saying, it doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, does it catch mice?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
they
yeah,
see markets in a way that we often don't. The first thing in Europe is, well, we've got to consolidate, we've got to scale up, and we've got to find a national champion and all that. They're like, no, let them tear each other to pieces, right? And they have an interesting term that we don't use here. So they look at markets as evolving. Let's let the market open up. Let's let the various species and breeds go and die and evolve, and we'll see what works, right? And then they have a different term from evolution. It's called involution. Involution is a complex term in China, and it can mean a few other things like just quitting. But what they try and do is they then try and reduce the competition. So it's
yeah.
got to let it go to do what competition's good at, innovation. Now that we've got pretty much most of the advantages of competition, let's consolidate. Um, and we, on the other hand, try and consolidate and then compete.
It's
It's
a
all
weird setup, China, isn't it? You've got a communist party running the show, yeah, but it's really working very much on capitalist basis, isn't it?
totally. The Chinese, in my experience, I've loved much of my work in China. I learned a lot there. wouldn't want to live there. That's not what I'm
No.
saying. But one of the things that is interesting is their use of tools. So when they find a tool that works, they use it. That's the Deng Xiaoping quote. Particularly good examples. I think it was 6 years ago. They decided to put in an ETS, an emissions trading scheme, because they'd seen that emissions trading schemes work in the West. Now, that's funny because that's a complete capitalist tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're like, great, that's it.
Yeah.
There are other areas where they decide not to use capitalist tools. So they're very, very pragmatic, very engineering oriented. The top echelon is, I forget, 80% engineers, where we tend to have lawyers in charge of things. So they're very pragmatic people at that level. Um, but as I say, I wouldn't want to live there.
No. But you
It
can
has
see how they've gained their success economically.
Yeah, but they're out to solve a problem, and sometimes we sort of dither around what's the problem,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then somebody will lose. Well, and that's another thing that has pluses and minuses in China. You can't advance if you need to make everyone a winner in a specified domain. It would be one argument, and they go, yeah, fine, you can. So they displace whole villages, millions of people. They do a lot of that sort of stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
I should say, how do I express this nicely? We wouldn't tolerate um, at all, but actually, maybe we should be tolerating some of the displacement and discomfort, but find ways to compensate for it. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. And we have many examples, whether it's hemophiliacs or post office people or whatever, where we claim that we're not like China, but we actually deny justice to large numbers of people and don't compensate them either. So the shoe can be on the other foot.
Just sticking with Asia for a minute, how do you see Iran? Is it a major concern?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, is Iran a major concern? Clearly, yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Probably more clearly, the Strait of Hormuz is a major concern. Iran's been cut off for decades now, effectively from the world economy, with the exception of oil. Um, the Strait of Hormuz is the bigger issue, and we're seeing huge changes there in redirection of pipelines, shipping routes, et cetera. But none of that's going to happen rapidly. So I personally think that the Strait of Hormuz is sadly going to be dominating the news for another 5 to 15 years.
And the chances of them actually getting a nuclear bomb. I mean, that's the scary bit, isn't it?
It is a scary bit. It's been a scary bit for a while. I went to around, I think it was 10, 11 years ago, investigating some of this stuff, not the nuclear stuff, but
Yeah.
what was the economy doing and all. And it's been a running issue. Nuclear proliferation is something that can keep any of us awake at night. It's actually arguably not done too well sorry, not done too badly since World War II. Nuclear proliferation has been moderately limited, but it doesn't take you long, travels to Korea to be reminded in Seoul that you're 30 miles from a nuclear power that is a bit unstable.
Yeah.
So it is something we need to watch.
And I don't think they'd think twice about using it.
I think they will. In my experience in Iran is that whilst it is an autocracy of various forms, it's certainly more of an open society than North Korea, which
Mm.
is, single dictator type stuff. There is a ruling class in Iran. They have their own concepts of royalty and stability. Remember, they're very proud to be Persian.
Yeah.
Um, and they believe that they come from a deep culture, and there are, what, 90 million people there. So I don't think it's quite as unstable, and I don't think that they necessarily would use it in a way that, if you remember, it was only 3.5 years ago, we were very feared that Vladimir Putin might be using a
Yes.
nuke.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for some reason, that conversation doesn't come up. And I would have thought, in terms of odds and probabilities, that I don't want to calculate. My guess would be that the odds of Russia using a nuke at the moment are higher than Iran, even if they have one.
What do you let's skip across to America. We miss out on Africa because we both know that unfortunately, whatever they try to do, it all goes wrong usually. Botswana being a classic example at the moment. It's got the
Uh,
biggest debt in the world, per capita. But not so long ago, it was a very successful country. But going across to North America, were you surprised to see Alberta in Canada is so dissatisfied that they're thinking about joining the people slightly to the south?
Well, one of my wife's very best friends is Canadian, and when she's over for lunch or dinner, it is my constant duty to torment her over Alberta. So I do it repeatedly. Um, I think there are a few things you can take out of our case. I mean, the first is to remember that viewed from afar, many nations look monolithic. Iran is,
Yeah,
obviously they're going to do this or something. In truth, every nation is split 52-48 on
yeah,
various subjects, for example, or 55-45, whatever. So Canada is similar. I think the second thing, we always have a problem analyzing things from a London perspective because we live in a highly centralized society. It's one of the reasons I like being on phone calls with you out there in Alderney. You have more perspective on the UK than we have here. So we forget that regional areas are not just kind of, wouldn't it be nice to balance a few things out of London, the Manchesterism of our current prime minister, but actual provinces, states that have got real staying power. And it makes it difficult for us to analyze places like Canada, Australia, America, Germany, even China, where there are actually very strong provinces do have large discretionary powers in some areas, and
yeah.
we misanalyze it because we assume everything is centralized. I think the second thing about Alberta is that whilst Canada, is clearly very anti-Trump overall, for good reason. I mean, he started might argue. Nevertheless, it is not a uniform area there. And I guess the third thing is just this concept that when you're looking at fiscal federal design, how resources are shared. One of the things that Alberta is a reminder that resource wealth plus a sense of being taxed by a distant capital does breed significant separatist ideas, not just in Europe.
And they've still got a lot of oil there, haven't they? So
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
that would be the attraction.
well, imagine, that the current number 10 in the North type approach was actually highly material, then you might well see a very similar reaction from London to the UK
Mm, mm,
because the capital is London and it is generating the stuff, we now have this kind of central regional problem in a different way. So there's a lot of things to watch out for, and I think Alberta shows you that you've got to bring in a federal system, you got to bring everybody along, and to do that, you have to show them what the net benefit is. And I often say this is one of the problems with the Brexit debate back in 2015-16 was everybody was on about what am I getting out of it? We put this money in, what are we getting out of it? Now, the truth is that the best you can do in a fair system would be to get, if everybody felt that way, was to be to get exactly back what you put in. But the center needs to run itself and do things as well, and it's there to redistribute. So it's as if sort of saying, well, I don't understand why I belong to a club if when I pay £350 club membership, I don't get my 350 back.
yeah,
That's not
yeah.
the way to look at it.
No.
The way to look at it is I put 350 in, I might get some money back. That's not the point. I belong to the club for all these other reasons.
But
And I'm
my
getting value.
generation, and I'm half a generation in front of you, when we voted in the 70s to join Europe, we were joining an economic union, not a political union. And I
Yes,
think a
yes.
lot of Brexit votes for were from people like me, who suddenly sort of said, "Well, this was not what you sold us in the first place."
Mm, mm.
And
And that is a big difference from Alberta because
yeah,
they're long in a political
yeah,
union and knew it.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
there's also an economic union, and they're arguing that the politics don't outweigh the economics. So we'll see. And don't forget as well that the I forget the exact numbers, but to run a referendum in Alberta and get the signatures is not that difficult. So the threshold is moderately low. So there's a lot of political posturing in this so far. But if it goes to the vote, we'll see.
And you're going to remind that lovely Canadian lady next time you see her about the current
Oh, either
setup.
way, it's just
Michael, is there anywhere in the world that hasn't got a huge national debt?
oh gosh, yeah, quite a few actually. Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland. The concept of large national debts is not universal. It is universal in the larger European nations.
Yeah,
So Italy, France, Spain, Germany, Britain, not very good. Um, China has got, that's an interesting question. Does China have or not have a large debt problem? Clearly has a large property problem, which is close to that. But I don't think Chinese debt levels are up there.
no,
America has a large debt problem, but seems to be growing at the same time. Um, but the temptation always, and this goes back to well, in fact, I think it goes back to Vespasian and others, is that any government is tends to be run by short-term interests when actually it should have the long term. And this is
yeah,
this time mismatch, and that time mismatch doesn't enforce much, by way of non-profligacy. So everybody's out there trying to spend today and let future generations handle it. And this is, I think, one of the defining characteristics of our time, and somewhat paradoxical. You would think that with the increased amount of information available, AIs, calculative abilities to trickle down and see what the real numbers are, closer to the real numbers than we would have ever guessed even 20 or 30 years ago on trade, what's landing at the docks, what's in shipment, what's in flight, so on.
mm,
We still take a shorter term view.
yeah, yeah. And the UK's got £3 trillion outstanding or thereabouts. At what point does the market say enough is enough?
Well, the market has said it's getting to be enough. We've seen,
Seen
genuine
the
rises.
yields go up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're higher now than they were under the lettuce administration. Um, so we're seeing that the markets are definitely concerned. Will the markets ever break? Well, I doubt it. There's a sort of notion that everybody's going to walk away from the table. The truth is they'll price it in.
Mm.
Uh, and I mean, Argentina could still get loans even after multiple defaults. Somebody will do it.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's why we put up with it that bothers me. And what particularly irks me about the national debate here, I was at a function not so long ago this year when a Tory politician gave a talk. He was going to talk to us for 5 minutes, and then he was going to listen to us. So he talked for 25 minutes. Um,
Gave
and
you
then
five.
hold on, said you wanted to chat to us, but you went on for 20. Oh, no, I didn't. And everybody around the table, I felt like the guy who'd relieved some gas in church. Everybody was like, well, actually, they said you did. Michael's right. I said, well,
Yeah.
that's not my question. My question is, when you talked about tax cuts, everybody around this table nodded. Yeah, we need tax cuts. We need tax cuts. I said, with the government taking up 45% of GDP, 42% in direct expenditure, and about 3% annual borrowing, 45%, you can't have tax cuts without cost cuts.
Yeah.
Um, and you've hit the level. You can cut income tax and rise it on VAT and play some games. But as you get to 45%, those games end.
Yeah.
And we're not having the cost cut discussion that we need in Britain.
Let's go on to immigration because that's something that President Trump is always going on about, and I think everyone in the UK is
Mm,
somewhat worried about it. Um, that Spanish incident in the enclave in North Africa the other day was a bit scary.
mm.
Mass invasion. Just seemed to be in a crazy situation where, with all these people coming across, we haven't got the resources to support them in any case.
Yeah, well, yeah, Ceuta, an interesting one was it 85,000 people, so anyway,
Yeah,
a gargantuan number for a tiny enclave. Of course, even more terrifying in a longer term, steadier way is what might happen to the Canary Isles, because that's actually the sort of the preferred route. When they go to
yeah,
Ceuta,
mm,
that's that. So we'll see. And of course, then the knock-on effect on Italy, where our government was, very, very concerned, and on you go. In truth, from a UK point of view, I don't think Chute is particularly important. Our numbers are nowhere near that, and they're not coming from there. The Spanish did a very good job responding, and actually getting people to be returned. But it shows you that, this sort of economic disparities make people move. These young men mostly were moving to make more money and
Yeah.
have a better life. And we deny them that, in a way. So again, this comes back to the long term. This is not a new issue. I know we skipped over Africa, but
Yes. Yeah.
if
Yeah. 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 But that's
if
where
we
a
had
lot of them are coming from.
if we had, since decolonization, worked somehow to make Africa richer and wealthier and more, then this desire to move would be lessened because the disparities would be less. So I think there's a lot that we need to do to take account of that.
Yeah. And of course, there has been an awful lot of corruption in Africa in the past. So you've got a
Mm.
situation really where you've sorry about that. You've got a situation where a lot of the money that could have gone to make the people's lives better, um, suddenly, is ending up in Switzerland or something like that.
Mm. Yeah.
It's very sad from that point of view. I'm very concerned about the amount of anti-Semitism we're seeing.
Mm.
Um, is there an answer to that? I
Well,
mean,
I don't.
people really should be forced to watch a few films about the Holocaust, I think,
Yeah.
to sort of give the Jewish people a better chance.
Well, it's what was it Pastor Martin Niemöller? First they came, first they came for them, and I said
Yeah,
nothing. Um, Without question, I find anti-Semitism absolutely disgusting. I have a first cousin who's actually a rabbi. I actually went to Hebrew school for a year,
yeah,
believe it or not. But I can in no way claim to be Jewish or anything. But what particularly bothers me about anti-Semitism is actually the prevarication that starts it. Anti-Semitism is just to me a no,
yeah,
as it would be a no for any other kind of intolerance for other people.
yes,
And that's, I think, what bothers me is that we somehow sort of, well, that's anti-Semitism, and we know that because it's been going on for 2,000 years, or well, 1,500 years, and we know all that. And I'm like, no, it's just a no, as it should be for any other kind of scapegoating. And I think anti-Semites get away with picking on what has long been a weak spot in society,
yeah,
as opposed to, I don't know, vilifying, you know, IT technology people like me or something. It's like, oh, that's okay because we've
yeah,
always done that. We
yeah.
understand it. We just
We're running a bit short on time, so can we skip on to President Putin's ambitions? Now, is he trying to conquer Europe, or is he trying to reinstate Russia to the time of the Tsar in terms of Ukraine?
know. I genuinely don't know, and me reading the mind of a foreign leader who is there, but I mean, I did pick out a quote from him, which was European swine wanted to feast on Russia's collapse.
Right.
And I
Okay.
and I do think that's how he feels. So if you view Putin in some way like a character in a film, if you're watching the film and he quoted that, you would immediately understand that this man is not going to be rational
No.
about any threats to Russia. Now, of course, that begs the question, what is rational? But I think he's got himself and large chunks of Russia into a mindset that is very difficult to get out of,
The
and very
casualty
difficult.
figures are horrendous, aren't they?
Yeah, well, and of course, the other thing, going back to anti-Semitism, is of course the vilification of the Ukrainians. The
Yeah.
Ukrainians are becoming the Russian Jews. It's really not a pleasant situation, as we know. And I think it was, to me, how do I explain this? When we had the the Gulf conflict stuff in late February, early, mostly March. Um, I remember somebody chatting with them because I do a bit of advisory work in the Gulf, and I was on the line, and I realized that they were shocked. Obviously, we'd be shocked in London at the
Yeah,
attacks that were coming in Dubai, and yet this is what the Ukrainians were dealing with every day,
yeah, yeah.
at,
It's
at a much greater scale, and continue to do so.
yeah.
Um, so I don't think we fully grasp, I certainly don't, the horror of what's going on in Ukraine. And equally, of course, they're raining it on the Russians, and many of the Russians are innocent people too. So how do we bag these conflicts? How do we let people, whether it's Iran, Putin, President Kid in North Korea, how do we let people like that get in charge and leave them there? It's a tough question.
Yeah, I mean, Hitler was a good example, wasn't he?
There are far too many,
Yeah,
far too many.
yeah.
Mugabe, it's just way too many, and I don't know how we do it. And there's been if we want to look to long-term stability, it is much more how we also in this regionalization and admiration for uh, semi-dictatorships or autocracies, um, we seem to be losing the battle for liberal democracy in our own minds. It's
Yeah.
one thing to have opponents; it's another thing to doubt yourself. Liberal democracy does make us more tolerant, does make us better, and arguably we need to figure out how to make liberal democracy work for the long term.
Michael, we've run out of time. I really enjoyed talking to you as ever. Many, many thanks for sparing me some time today. And hopefully you will make it over to Alderney sometime.
I would love to. And great to see you, Tony, and my greetings to everybody over the water, and with high hopes that your energy and your airline systems get back into full tilt soon. Thank you.
We keep our fingers crossed. Thank you, Michael.